Story 1. In some ways it was scarier because it happened during the day. We lived out in the country, in the foothills of the Sierras. I was in high school at the time. I was walking down the hill from our neighbor's place. There was a small group of trees, and as I entered it, I heard a man's voice calling for help. It sounded like it was coming from about 50 yards away. I froze. I knew there was no way anyone should be on our property. It was all privately owned, and there were no trails. Anyone would have had to use someone's driveway and walk right past their house. I just stood there. Then the voice changed. It became a woman's voice. That is when I knew it was something bad. I stayed still. I wouldn't even look in that direction. Then my friend's dad came down the trail behind me to ask me about something, and the voice stopped. I thought for a minute that maybe he had been playing a trick on me, but the voice didn't come from behind me, and the second voice definitely sounded like a woman. I never liked going out in the dark alone when we lived there. Bye. Deleted. The story ends. Story 2. I was hiking with this guy at Volcanoes National Park around 2 a.m. to take pictures of the lava. We had to walk along a road that had been abandoned for a long time in a place called Desolation Wilderness for a few miles to get to the overlook of the caldera, which has a bubbling lava lake in it. Not only is the volcano itself associated with deep spiritual native lore, but I have been told by someone who works for the parks that they are always finding human remains, and they don't even report half of it. Anyway, we take some pictures, and in each frame I am getting a lot of noise despite my ISO being 200, camera talk for very little grain in the image. There are these colored points of light or orbs in different places in every shot. There were dozens of them, if not more. I thought it was weird, wondering what was producing these random artifacts on my image, but I get some cool shots and we start walking back. It is now well after 3 a.m. and nobody else is around. This is where it gets weird. Shortly after, we see a light up ahead of us on the trail that looked as if it were a hiker shining their flashlight as they headed toward us, just bobbing along. We thought nothing of it, as we were just expecting to come across a hiker heading the opposite way. We keep going for a bit and never pass anyone, which we thought was very odd. It is so quiet out there that you could hear a pin drop, and since there was only this road with dense brush on either side, it was basically too dangerous to go even a few steps off the path in any direction. We walk further along and we see another light shine. This time, it looked like it was shining onto a person, and we could now clearly make out the perfect black silhouette of a man walking in our direction just a little ahead of us near a bend in the road, maybe 40 yards away. Suddenly, the light vanished again. This time, I was certain we would come across someone. As we keep walking, we get to the point in the road where we had seen the black shadow just seconds earlier, and there is nobody there. The only way my brain could make sense of it was that someone jumped off the trail and into the bushes, but there was complete silence, no sounds of twigs snapping or rustling. The hair was standing up on the backs of our necks. We kept going and finally reached our car, and it was the only one there. Once we had passed that spot, it felt as though someone was behind us from then on, and I just kept compulsively checking over my shoulder. We never encountered anyone, but we had the distinct feeling someone else was there with us, all the way from when we first saw the light until we reached the parking lot. I later saw on the news that a lone hiker had fallen off a ledge into the caldera to his death about a week earlier, almost exactly where we saw the mysterious shadow figure at 3 a.m. Bye, Shinese. The story ends. Story 3. The building is a hotel along a Georgian terrace that is around 300 years old in the UK. It was once a large house with 2 houses next door full of apartments that the hotel purchased in the 1980s and has since combined to create more hotel rooms. The far house, which we call House 6, is accessible from its own front door, a very narrow staircase from the 4th floor of the hotel, which used to be attic rooms for servants. House 6 has a single wide spiral staircase, so from the top, you can look down and see people going down or up the stairs. Each landing has a fire door leading to 2 bedrooms. I was working next to 2 rooms at the top, just inside the fire door that leads to the very narrow staircase up to the attic rooms. I could hear people banging above my head. It sounded like maintenance and shouting. I knew those rooms on the 4th floor were empty, so I texted the front hall to ask if any maintenance staff were in there, as rooms were not released until 3 p.m. I got confirmation that no one was there. Suddenly, and this is what gave me a sense of dread, I could hear them running down this narrow staircase with the footsteps getting closer and louder. When I looked through the narrow glass on the fire door, I saw a shadow block out the light and go past, then another and another. When I fully opened the fire door to see who it was, thinking kids were running around the hotel, and looked down the staircase, there was no one there. Then it dawned on me that they had actually carried on past the fire door and had gone through the wall opposite the stairs instead of down them. We have also had 2 staff members hear screaming from one of the attic rooms at different times, and what sounded like a party with people talking and music in another, which stopped the moment you opened the door to check. By J.L. Vidge. The story ends. Story 4. Back when I was around 13 or 14, my cousin and I had a massive obsession with exploring abandoned places. Considering we live in the suburbs of Melbourne, we are mostly limited to abandoned houses. I was over at my cousin's house for a sleepover, and we were having a barbecue for dinner. My uncle told us to get some lemons from one of the neighbors' lemon trees in their backyard. The reason we took their lemons was because the house had been abandoned for years. Both my uncle and my aunt had told us that the homeowner, an old woman, had died a few years back. Therefore, we would always go into the backyard to take lemons, but we had never actually been inside. Being teenagers who were obsessed with exploring abandoned houses, we decided that day we would also explore the interior. It was an old brick house that looked like it was built in the 70s. While we were picking the lemons, we checked all the windows to see if anyone was inside. Of course, it was empty since it is abandoned after all. After delivering the lemons, we went to the front door. I knocked on the door and yelled to see if anyone was home for a solid 2 minutes, just in case. There was no answer, so it was time to enter. The screen door was unlocked, but the wooden front door was locked by one of those old locks where there is a pin you have to slide across from the inside. I managed to open the door slightly, fit my hand through the gap and unlock it. We were inside messing around for about 5 minutes. The house was empty except for a couple of pieces of furniture, one of those being an old piano. While playing on the piano and making quite a lot of noise, we noticed faint music playing from inside the house. We could hear it from the start, but we didn't really think about it until then. It was creepy. We went to investigate the rest of the house by following the sound of the music, and we ended up at a closed door with light shining through the bottom. It truly felt like we were in a horror movie. I opened the door and there was an old lady sitting facing away from us with a music box playing on the table. This was really weird since we had looked into this room from the window when we were getting the lemons, and there was no one inside. The lady looked as if she were dead, so I panicked and asked her, "Are you okay?" I got no response, so I thought she had passed away. I got closer and asked again, still no response. I asked a final time and she stood up and turned around. She looked truly horrible. I could tell it was not a homeless person or a squatter based on how clean and expensive her clothes looked, but her face was pale and looked like a corpse. She turned around and screamed, "Who the heck are you?" And we just ran back to my cousin's house. I don't know if I saw the ghost of the old lady or if she was never actually dead, but during dinner, we asked my uncle about her again. He said she had been living in a nursing home for 4 years prior to her death, and he knew she was dead because he would go visit her from time to time. Bye. Deleted.